at the retreat for putting on such a beautiful place with an absolutely amazing message. I've been to sanctuaries before where it's not clear why the reason it's important to go vegan, for example. You walk around this place, the message is absolutely abundantly clear. You can not fail to make the connections. So thank you for all the hard work and effort that they put in, and thank you to Mobius Loop for this amazing stage that I'm privileged to be standing in front of, and everything they do. I love you guys. I can't wait to see your next album come out, and I'm looking forward to that. So that's thank you, and thank you for anyone who's come along and spoken to me this weekend, and I've really enjoyed meeting some new people and seeing some old faces. So I won't start by talking about what I'm doing now and the kind of activism I'm involved with. I'll end with that because it's kind of a journey for me. So the reason I was asked to speak is because of that journey and because of where I started out. So the journey has been sort of from innocence to hell and out again. So as a child, I was always surrounded by animals. I loved animals. We always had companion animals in our house, usually dogs, but also I was into my reptiles, so I had snakes, iguanas, that kind of thing, and always surrounded myself. Loved going to zoos and safari parks. Like Melissa was saying yesterday, some of the things that she used to love doing and she now hates, it's exactly the same for me. I used to love anything to do with animals. I'd spend my spare time drawing animals. I just loved being around them. So jump forward to when I reached working age. At 16 years old, I left school. And at that point, it was 1985, we're in the midst of a very severe unemployment, very highest unemployment of my life, I think. And there was a scheme at the time called the Youth Training Scheme, which I had a choice. I signed up to that, or I got no money, and therefore no means of paying my parents for keeping me in their house and feeding me, that kind of thing. So they asked me, they interview you, they asked me what kind of job I'd like. I said I'd like to work with animals. So in their wisdom, they decided to put me in a slaughterhouse and as a butcher. Now, at 16, I didn't yet have the intellectual capacity to realise that that was an option and not an unchangeable route. And I thought I had no choice. I thought I'd got to do this, and so I was thrown into that. And I also, I came from a quite machismo background. I was into my boxing and weights and stuff, and I would have regarded it as a slight on my masculinity, forgive me for once thinking that way, to not be able to do this kind of work. So I turned up the first day, and they show you an animal being killed, and to see what your reaction is and whether you'll be able to work in this job. That animal was a cow. I remember it very clearly. I won't graphically describe what happened, but the process of killing a cow happened before me, and I then went home. They phoned me up later that day to say, you know, how did you feel about it? Will you be okay doing this job? And I ended up back in that afternoon starting my first shift. So from a young lad who loved animals and just wanted to stay fit and healthy, I was placed in this very graphic, horrible environment to learn my trade, because you were paid, it was supposed to be a trade, a little bit like an apprenticeship, but you're paid £27.30 a week, and you're supposed to learn how to butcher and kill animals. So that's what I was doing for a while. And it taught me a lot. It taught me a few things about myself. It taught me a few things about animals. So the key things it taught me were that anyone can do that job. So when people think about slaughterhouse workers, they think these guys must be psychopaths, they're all evil, there's something wrong with them. You know, they go into that job like any of us, normal people, and they just want to earn a living, get home and pay their bills and the rest of it, just like all of us. Yes, there are some psychopaths who do that job. There are some psychopaths in Houses of Parliament. They're psychopaths in all walks of life. So yes, you do see some very disturbing footage that's caught on camera in slaughterhouses, and I have worked with some of them people, and it's affected me and them people, but I can talk about that on another occasion or later if time permits. So the other things it's taught me, I like to give people this key message because I do a lot of outreach, and people will come up to you and say, but slaughter's humane, I only have humanely reared and humanely slaughtered meat or dairy or eggs, the rest of it. Now it's taught me that there are, during the experience of the slaughterhouse, animals respond in typically 3 ways. There is a 4th way that I'll touch on at the end, but the first primary, most common response an animal has to being in that slaughterhouse, being dragged to or prodded to or kicked to or pushed to the slaughtermen and ultimately being killed by them, the primary response is fear. So you'll see animals cowering, animals hiding, animals making sounds that you'd associate with fear along with tears. So I'm not going to try and anthropomorphise animals, but what I will say is when you see tears and you describe them as crying, I only say that when I can associate it with the other behaviours that I would associate with distress and fear. So when I say animals cry, I mean it. They do cry. They are fearful. They can see, hear and smell their comrades being killed. And they're very sensitive. They have far more powerful senses than we do in many instances. So those who do vigils will notice the reactions as some animals approach the slaughterhouse. They get very distressed because they can smell it. They know what they're coming to. They can hear the sounds that we can't necessarily hear. So they're very aware of the surroundings. So that primary response is fear. The second most common response is flight. So they'll try and run away, they'll try and escape you. If you're trying to catch a sheep in a sheep run, they'll try and avoid you, try and get past you. They'll try and escape your knife when you've got them on their back and you're about to slit their throat. These animals are fearful and they're trying to get away. There's a third response, which is less common, and that's the fight response. So sometimes you might see a cow trying to kick you or headbutt you. You might see sheep trying to butt you. A pig might try and bite you. These are not very common responses, but they do happen. So primarily fear, secondly flight, and third fight. I know many people will have heard those 3 things before in relation to how humans react to situations where they're being attacked. It's a common response in all animals. I mentioned a 4th way, and this is this was really eye-opening to me about dairy. So the 4th way, the only time I've ever seen an animal that you could come remotely close to saying the slaughter was humane is when I've seen a downed dairy cow coming into the slaughterhouse. So they've given up. You can prod them, you can pull them, you can show them the knife, they know what's coming and there's no response. The eyes are glazed over, they've given up. These animals are absolutely broken. So yeah, they're the 4 responses that you will see in an animal in that environment. Not one of them, not even that last one, is humane, because that animal will have been through so much to get to that point of brokenness. So I won't bother telling you all about the process of dairy. Steve eloquently said it yesterday, and what happens to dairy cows. And I could talk to people afterwards if they want to know and didn't catch what Steve said, or I'm sure he'll tell them, or you can research it. But it's a horrible process. These animals, people think, oh, I'm only eating cheese, I'm only eating butter, I'm only drinking cow's milk, or I'm only putting whey protein in my drink before I go to the gym. All these things result in that broken cow that I've seen before me. So they're the responses. So when people tell me about humane slaughter, I can look them in the eye and say that's a lie. There is no such thing as humane slaughter. You cannot kill anybody who doesn't want to die and call it humane. It's an oxymoron. So it's not just the killing that's traumatic and horrific for these animals. It's the catching, the treatment they have at the farms, but I'm talking about the slaughter journey, so I'll stick to that. So the catching and transportation of these animals, it's horrific. Anyone who's seen chickens being caught from the chicken farm and loaded into those trays that they throw onto the trucks will know exactly what I mean. These are probably the most abused animals in the animal kingdom, chickens. They are very sensitive animals, very bright, very loving. They're full of character, just like all the other animals that we talked about. And they will be grabbed. There's masses of them. If you see these broiler chickens, the sheds they're in, they're absolutely rammed full. They will be grabbed in multiple numbers and flung into these trays by the wing, by the leg, by the neck, by any part the slaughterman can, well, not the slaughterman, the catchers can grab, and they will throw them into these trays to be transported. They often suffer broken wings, broken legs, broken necks, severe bruising, and all kinds of injuries. And it's a horrible thing to witness and to have been a part of. You then have the transportation. It's not natural for animals to travel in this way. Those of us who do vigils will have seen the distress of animals as they're arriving at slaughterhouses, and it's a very difficult thing to do to decide whether or not you're going to film certain animals, because if they're so distressed, you could be adding to that. So you have to take a step back sometimes if they're very distressed, knowing that they're going to die and you can do nothing about it apart from witness for them and to be able to say, we see you, we're trying, and we're going to make other people aware of what's going on. So that's what people at Vigils are doing. We also have witnessed some horrific things at the vigils. I do the Guildford vigil, occasionally Farnborough as well, and I was stood one side of a truck one day as it was coming in full of cows. I think they were dairy cows, and they were coming into the slaughterhouse, and one of the cows had their hoof caught in a slat in the truck. So that cow had come all the way from Wales to Guildford, and who knows how long that hoof had been stuck in that slat. Imagine the pain that that poor animal was going through and the stress, and how that would have affected the other cows on board as well. So these animals are not just suffering a horrific death. I don't care if you say you choose your animals carefully, that you consume, that you only get them that are loved and massaged at the farms and given the best life, belly rubs, whatever. They all go on that journey and they all die in that way. So you would be just as responsible as the person buying a factory farmed chicken, cow, pig, sheep, or whatever other animal you choose to eat. So these poor animals are suffering every step of the way of that journey. My experience in slaughterhouses has taught me that there is no humane thing that happens at any stage of that process. So, I think I've talked enough about the horrific side of things, but there is hope. And I went up to Newcastle a few years ago and visited some friends who do vigils there. I think it was the Bowlam slaughterhouse. And they took me along, and I was very worried. I'd never been to a vigil before. I was very worried with my background, how people might respond to me. These people were absolutely beautiful people. They made me feel as though...
Doing good, mate. Go on, dog.
So, these people accepted me and told me that I am proof that they're not wasting their breath. It's not often this happens, but occasionally it does. You know, because sometimes it's hard to deal with what I've done. But as I said, there's hope. So I'm no longer that person. I do all kinds of activism now. I've been sabbing since the mid-90s. I went vegan in 1996, 27 years ago on the 20th of July.
Yep.
So I've done liberations, I've done outreach, I do anti-snaring campaigns, as Chris mentioned earlier. I go out onto estates that I'm not allowed on, and I litter pick. So people who know me will know if I do a post on social media saying I've gone litter picking, they'll know exactly what I mean. And I posted something recently that I was walking along the South Downs Way. I'm not going to say that I was or wasn't on the Norfolk estate, but that's nearby. I'm not allowed on there, so I definitely can't say I was on there. And it's a public right of way. And just halfway into a little copse, there's a fence that separates it from private land, an estate. And you can step over that fence because it's down. So people walk their dogs around there. People, you know, I'm not going to value one animal's life over any other. But as I stepped over that fence, within 10 feet of me, there was a fawn stuck in a snare. I was very lucky with my timing. I happened to walk there at the right time in the right place, and I was able to assess the injuries. I took a very quick film just as evidence, about 5 seconds, to show this fawn stuck in a snare. I took hold of her, made sure the snare was loose enough, and I cut it with my wire cutters. And once I was sure she was free of injury, I let her go and she bolted off. And it was a beautiful thing. I found larson traps, which are banned in the country that invented them, incidentally. I find larson traps and I free corvids. It's illegal to do that because apparently they're legal, but it's not illegal. If you know the law, you'll know that with larson traps, they've got to have, where they put a decoy bird in there, a magpie or a crow or a jay, where they put that bird, they've got to have water and food and something to stand up to perch on. If they don't have that, you're perfectly entitled to damage these to get these birds free. And before I start filming, I might redecorate that cage before I empty it. So that's a tip. If you ever do want to free them and you want to prove that you've done nothing wrong, you might want to make sure there's nothing in there before you film yourself freeing the bird, because they are, again, just like the deer, no animal has more value than another, and no more than us. When I free a magpie or a crow, it gives me a feeling just like when I freed that fawn. There's no better feeling. I've liberated animals that are domesticated, that are tested on, they're all sorts of animals. There's no better feeling for me than freeing a wild animal and letting them go back to where they should be. That fawn back with the mother, the birds back in the trees. It's an amazing feeling. So now, when I get those moments at night, when I'm battling demons and I'm seeing the screaming pig that's been dumped into a scalding tank, still conscious, unslaughtered, because they were so rushed, they didn't do the job properly. And I often have sleepless nights where I picture that, and I can see that pig's eyes, I can hear their screams, and I can hear them begging me to help them, and I didn't. But now I can replace that image with these corvids, these beautiful birds, with deer, with squirrels, with foxes and badgers and stoats and all the other animals that are now running free because of what I've done. So what I don't want you to do is firstly feel sorry for me for the trauma I've gone through, because yes, I'm a victim, but I'm not the victim. Anything I've suffered, or other slaughterhouse workers or farmers suffer mentally as a consequence of doing that job, we had a choice. Those animals do not. They suffer incredibly and enormously because of people's choices. So don't ever feel sorry for me above and beyond those animals. They are the ones who deserve our pity and our love and our regret. I feel shame when I think about my past. I feel upset. Yes, I've gone through a process of trying to forgive myself, and I've forgiven everyone who's ever harmed me, but it's tough. What I won't do is I will never ever achieve that peace. What I will do is I will spend my life atoning for what I've done with as much and as hard a form of liberation as I can do, and I will do my damnedest to free as many animals as I can and to make sure as many others can run free and can escape the butcher's knife. That is my life's mission. So while I think going vegan changed me, it made me a better person, didn't make me a good person, it made me a better person. I still do some bad things. I still sometimes lose my temper when I shouldn't. I think getting involved with Animal Rising this year has helped me to control that anger that I have inside of me. I did their MVDA training with some beautiful people, and their influence on me has been great. So support their events and their campaigns. I can be critical of all kinds of people, but that doesn't mean that I don't support their general work. So if you see me criticising something, it's because of I'm so passionate. It's not because I don't agree with everything they're doing. I might agree with something they're not doing. So please don't think I'm your enemy, because I am your ally, just like I'm the animals' ally and not their enemy. So I hope that you all go away from this talk with a little more understanding about the kind of people who work in those horrible places. And just remember, when you feel a lack of compassion towards someone who's died or been hurt, who works in animal abuse in industries, I've seen people share, whether there was a famous chef who died a few years ago, and he specialised in exotic animals in his menus, and lots of people shared how joyous they were at his death. I didn't. I'm not going to pretend that I was upset that he died, but I did not take any pleasure in his death, because he could change. Anyone could change. The man who's killing an animal today could be an activist tomorrow. I look at it as though if I'd have died 27 years ago, those people who are sharing those things on social media saying they're glad he's dead would have been glad I was dead. So I've spent 27 years now as an activist, and I've got many more to come, I hope. And I hope I become a better person as a consequence of those people I surround myself with. So thank you for listening to me. I hope I haven't overran too long. Enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much, brother. Can we give it up for Vegangelical, everyone? We're so grateful for your perspective, man. Thank you so much. You got me crying then. I'm so grateful.